The world had seen titans rise and fall. Gods had walked among men, monsters had torn cities asunder, and legends were forged in the fire of battle. But even in this grand theater of chaos, few conflicts could promise a showdown. As seismic as the coming clash between two avatars of raw power, the Thing, Benjamin J. Grimm of the Fantastic Four, and the Juggernaut, Cain Marco, the unstoppable force chosen by the demon Cyttorak. It began far from the bustling streets of New York City, in the deep wilderness near the Canadian Rockies. There, S.H.I.E.L.D. had detected strange readings, spikes of magical energy, so potent they could tear the veil between realms. Director Fury, not one to take chances with multiversal anomalies, dispatched a stealth team to investigate. What they found was a smoldering crater pulsing with crimson light, and at its center stood Cain Marco, freed from years of magical imprisonment in an alternate dimension by a tear in the multiverse. Juggernaut had returned, angrier, more ruthless, and more determined than ever, but something was different. The Cyttorak gem embedded in his chest had grown darker, more volatile. During his exile, Cyttorak had poured even more of his essence into Marco, transforming him from a mere avatar to something closer to a living conduit of destruction. Juggernaut wasn't just unstoppable now, he was nearly godlike. He had one goal: revenge. Revenge on a world that had forgotten him. Revenge on heroes who thought they could imprison or redeem him. Revenge on fate itself. His rampage began in rural Canada and left a trail of shattered forests, overturned mountainsides and burning towns. Despite warnings from S.H.I.E.L.D. and mystical wards cast by Dr. Strange, nothing slowed his advance. X-Men operatives tried to intercept him. Colossus, even enhanced by the power of Cyttorak himself, failed to stand against him for more than 2 minutes. Cain wasn't just a force, he was a reckoning. Back in New York, Reed Richards watched the news with a sinking feeling in his gut. His quantum detectors had registered Cain's return days before S.H.I.E.L.D. made their announcement. Reed knew what was coming. Juggernaut would make his way to New York, as he always did. And there was no telling how far he'd go this time. "I've sent alerts to the Avengers," Reed said, adjusting the holographic display. "But most of them are off-world. This might be up to us." "I know that looks stretch," Ben Grimm muttered, stepping into the lab with his massive arms crossed over his chest. "You already know who you're gonna ask to take the first swing." Reed didn't answer at first. Instead, he pulled up a side-by-side schematic of Juggernaut's latest transformation and the Thing's own molecular structure. "Ben, he's different now. You're tough. Probably one of the toughest beings on Earth. But Cain isn't just a runaway tank anymore. He's a living magical anomaly." Ben smirked. "Good. Then maybe I'll finally get a workout. You said it yourself. I'm always holding back. But what happens when I don't?" Sue stormed in moments later, visibly upset. "You can't let him go alone." "Ben, you're talking about Juggernaut. You remember what happened in Vegas?" "I do," Ben said grimly. "But I also remember who stopped him back then." The Fantastic Four held an emergency meeting. Johnny offered to help, but Reed and Ben both agreed. This wasn't a group job. It had to be a one-on-one. Juggernaut had to be stopped before he reached the population centers along the East Coast. This had to be a wall versus wall standoff, and no one was more of a wall than Benjamin Grimm. Reed, ever the scientist, devised a plan. They tracked Cain's trajectory and calculated his most likely path, straight through Pennsylvania, headed directly for Manhattan. In the remote industrial zone near Scranton, Reed arranged a massive containment field, a steel and vibranium compound rigged with stark repulsors, Wakandan energy dampeners, and mystical seals borrowed from Dr. Strange. That's where Ben would wait. But this wasn't just about duty for him. This was personal. Years ago, Cain Marco had humiliated him during a multi-team mission against the Brotherhood of Mutants. Juggernaut had nearly snapped Ben's spine in front of a dozen heroes. Reed managed to pull him out in time, but the bruises, physical and emotional, never quite healed. Ben had replayed that fight in his head 1,000 times since. This time there would be no rescue, no distractions. Just two titans, one path, one winner. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ben stood silently in the center of the abandoned industrial lot, his rocky frame casting a long shadow across the cracked concrete. Around him, containment shields shimmered with power. Drones hovered above. Emergency medics waited on standby half a mile away. The city held its breath. Then the earth trembled. Trees exploded outward from the forest edge as a crimson blur smashed through them. Dust and debris filled the air. A shockwave surged out as a mountain of muscle and rage emerged. Cain Marco. His armor was etched with glowing runes. His eyes blazed with otherworldly energy. And on his face was the cruelest smile Ben had ever seen. Well, well, Cain rumbled, voice echoing like thunder. Didn't expect them to send a warm-up. Ben clenched his fists, cracked his neck, and stepped forward. Warm-up? No, I'm the main event, ugly. For a brief second, the world was silent. Then with a roar, Cain charged, and Ben didn't move. Not yet. He waited. He wanted this moment to last, this calm before the storm, this silence before the quake. Because deep down, in that ever-beating heart beneath his stone skin, Ben Grimm knew this was the fight of his life. And he wouldn't back down, not this time. The wind howled as Juggernaut charged. The ground split beneath his feet with every monstrous step, and the air trembled from the force of his momentum. He was a living avalanche, wrapped in mystical armor and burning with fury. And ahead of him stood Ben Grimm, the ever-loving blue-eyed thing, legs rooted like a skyscraper's foundation. Ben didn't flinch. When Juggernaut finally collided with him, the shockwave detonated like a bomb. The blast obliterated the ground around them, shattered the containment field in an instant, and sent drones spiraling from the sky. Trees miles away bent under the force. Dust and rock rose in a mushroom cloud of chaos. But when the dust cleared, the impossible had happened. Ben was still standing. He'd been driven back only inches, feet digging twin trenches into the earth, but he held. Gripping Juggernaut's shoulders, he growled, "Told ya, I ain't a warm-up." With a sudden pivot, Ben twisted and hurled Cain overhead. The unthinkable, Juggernaut flew, crashing through several cargo containers and embedded halfway into a concrete wall. Steel beams groaned and collapsed around him. Juggernaut roared, "You dare?" He tore free like a monster from a cage and lunged again. Fists met fists. Shockwaves rippled across the city outskirts. Each punch from Cain could level a building, but Ben met them blow for blow. The ground cratered under their feet, buildings around them collapsing like dominoes. But this wasn't just a brawl. It was a war of endurance. Ben ducked a swing and countered with a hammer fist to Cain's jaw. The impact cracked the ground for 100 meters. Juggernaut stumbled just for a second, but that second was everything. Ben pressed the attack, battering Cain with a flurry of haymakers, body blows and uppercuts fueled by decades of pain. Grit and heart. You ain't the only one who's tired of being underestimated. Ben shouted, slamming both fists into Juggernaut's chest like twin wrecking balls. Cain was hurled backward, tearing through the remains of a factory wall and into a refinery pipeline. Oil sprayed and flames erupted. The entire area lit up in fire and smoke. But from the inferno, Cain emerged, scarred, furious, and glowing with crimson light. "You think this is a fight, Grimm?" He bellowed. "I'm power incarnate. I'm unstoppable." He stomped the ground, and a pulse of magical energy exploded outward. Ben was thrown back, tumbling across broken concrete until he hit the base of a collapsed tower. Juggernaut stomped toward him, each step melting asphalt underfoot. "I've crushed God's thing. What hope do you have?" Ben slowly got up, blood leaking from a split in his rocky forehead. "Hope? I don't need hope. I got heart." Cain lunged, and Ben met him head-on. This time, they didn't just punch. They tore through each other like titans of myth. Juggernaut's fists shattered steel girders. Ben's blows caved in reinforced concrete. Cain hurled Ben into a train car. Ben responded by ripping up the tracks and swinging them like a mace. Hours passed like minutes. The world around them became a battlefield of rubble and ruin. Every time Ben fell, he got back up. And every time Juggernaut landed a blow, it took just a little more out of him. That was the key. Cyttorak's power made Cain unstoppable, but not invincible. His body could endure, but his mind, his stamina, his will, Ben dug deeper. Every insult he'd heard, every battle he'd fought, every time someone said he wasn't smart enough, fast enough, strong enough, he channeled it all. With the final roar, Ben slammed his rocky knuckles together and unleashed a haymaker that caught Juggernaut square in the helmet, shattering it. Kane stumbled. Ben didn't wait. He surged forward with a combination of brutal punches. Left, right, left again, each strike cracking more of Juggernaut's mystical armor, each blow drawing a grunt, then a groan, then a cry of pain from the giant, and then one final uppercut. Kane Marco's feet left the ground. He flew back like a meteor, crashing in reverse, and landed in a crater of his own making. Unmoving, smoke drifted from the crater as silence settled. Ben stood above him, chest heaving, one eye swollen shut, arms trembling but still upright. Juggernaut groaned faintly, trying to rise, but his body betrayed him. The power of Cyttorak pulsed, then dimmed. He passed out. S.H.I.E.L.D. arrived minutes later. The scene was unspeakable destruction, but at its center, they found Ben Grimm, sitting quietly beside the fallen Juggernaut, knuckles bloodied and heart still pounding. When they asked what happened, Ben didn't say much. He just said, "Told you, it's clobbering time."